What is the worst way you've seen someone mismanage their money? Well, the accountant at the small business I work at does a lot of funny things with money. Has a perfectly good, paid off car, but it was slightly too old to drive for Uber to make extra money, so she got a lease on a brand new car through Uber. After a month she found out she wasn't making enough extra money from Uber to even pay the lease, and her commute was too far to drive the Uber car to work and back, because they limit the miles. After she weaseled out of her Uber lease, she decided she needed a brand new Harley that she had no idea how to drive. This was over a year ago. She has ridden it exactly once around her neighborhood. She will be paying for this motorcycle for another 4 years at least. She took out a second mortgage on her home to fix it up to get ready to sell. She is so happy with the remodel that she is keeping the house. She is a single mother twice over, and is always telling us how some nice man from her church paid for her daughter's school trip or whatever. She is the dumbest person I have ever met, and I am always a little freaked out that she is handling our money. You should be. Every fraud story I've heard used to be an auditor, went just like yours. Hopefully there are good controls in place so that reviews and approvals are required and the expenditures are accounted for. Divorce. Growing up, we were good friends with a family that had made it big with selling airplane parts pre-internet age. The couple went through a nasty divorce that got strung out over a 6-year period. The wife was 100% convinced through her shitbag lawyers that her husband had funneled money into secret accounts. He didn't, and wasn't happy with his initial offer, the mansion, half the multi-millions, and $5,000 a month for child support alone. The court proceedings went on for years, and at the end of it all, they both pretty much had nothing due to court fees and lawyer fees. His business failed because of how unstable air travel became after 9/11. If she had just split things and taken that with the mansion and the other payments, she would have gotten $4.2 million from the divorce, not having worked a day in her life. TLDR. Divorce is a hell of a drug. The wife was 100% convinced through her shitbag lawyers. Shitbag lawyers playing both sides of the game. Husband has funds hidden away, get huge commission for winning a bigger settlement in the divorce. Husband has no money hidden away, drag case through courts for years, racking up billable hours. Win-win for them. I have an idiot friend who's getting something like 30% of his wages garnished. Why? Because he forgot to pay his student loan. He's crap at paying bills, and it's not because he doesn't make the money for it. He has a decent job. He just literally ignores paper mail and emails reminding him and then eventually demanding him to pay off things like credit card bills and his student loans. If he does bother to read them, it literally goes in one ear and out the other. Just slides right out of his mind. After a few months he'll remember, log into his account, pay the payment in full with accrued interest and shrug it off like it's normal. Somehow he forgot to pay his student loans for something like a year and it went to collections. I told him he could even just set up automatic payments for that crap and he agrees it's a good idea, and then just never does it. I offered to set it up for him and it's always later. Friend got $150k in life insurance from her mom passing. It was gone in a year. She paid a $20k bail for her boyfriend. At the end of that year, he was also gone. She works at Popeyes now. The idea of bail is that you get it back though. A friend at 37 who had never worked any job that pay above minimum wages inherited tons of money from his father. Despite having absolutely no experience in any of those positions or even how to manage a business. Suddenly open up a restaurant which was a disaster from day one and closed down not long afterward. Decided to get into photography business. Throw away tons of money on all super fancy equipment he had absolutely no idea what is for or how to use. Never made a penny. Tried to start a DJ business. No bite. Disappeared off face of the earth right afterward. I bet his social media was all about grinding, hustling, and killing it. My friend, whom I love dearly, recently has been driving me pretty insane. Her parents are terrible with their money, and she has been complaining for ages about how inconsiderate and irresponsible they are. How they infuriate her because they buy things they don't actually need with the reasoning of, well, It'll make us someone else happy, so what's the problem? She calls me a month or so ago because thanks to her parents and their irrational spending habits and irresponsibility, she may not be able to finish school. She doesn't know how she'll manage to eat or afford anything she needs, and she can't get a full-time job right now either. So she and her boyfriend, who she's breaking up with soon, decide that, instead of saving their very limited money and using it wisely, they would impulsively buy 2 puppies. I don't know the breed, but they'll be huge dogs when they grow up. From a sketchy stranger on Facebook who they don't know and who charged them hundreds of dollars for the pups. Her reasoning for getting them: when she knows she can't afford them, they'll make me happy, so it'll help with the stress of not having any money. I'm still enraged, honestly. The hypocrisy, irresponsibility, and impulsivity is maddening. Of all the posts in this thread, I find this one the most infuriating. Those poor puppies don't stand a chance. My friend is basically a 37-year-old child with a good salary. One month his water bill was $700. He asked me if I thought it was because his sink faucet was dripping. I said it sounded more like a broken pipe. He never found out the issue. He just paid the bill and said, oh well. Probably one of those guys that has his mom do everything for him. I know a lot of men that were big time mama's boys that make good money now, and if they get a utility bill that's $500 a month, they will pay the bill instead of calling to see what the issue is. A guy I worked with was always complaining that he was poor, although I later found out that this was solely due to bad budgeting and impulse spending. He was really good at his job, so I suggested that he do some freelance IT security consulting on the side. He did a job for a high-end jeweler which paid him around £2,000 for 2 days work. He was ecstatic that he finally had enough money to fix all the problems he'd been putting off for ages, like the oil leak on his car, a new pair of work shoes, and get his boiler fixed. At the end of the job, he was leaving the retailers with cash in hand when he spotted a high-end watch in a display case which was £2,000 down from £3,500 or so. Unable to pass up such a bargain, he handed the £2 back and walked out with the watch instead. 2 days later he was complaining because his fridge was empty. My response was, at least you can use the watch to time how long it takes you to starve. LOL, great line at the end there. How could he have all these plans to use the $2K to better his comfort in life and then suddenly see a nice watch and go all ooh shiny? Grew up fairly wealthy, went to a private school with lots of other wealthy kids. Knew one girl who had 2 wealthy parents pass away when she was young. She lived with an uncle. She was messed up as a kid, really wild, always the first to try everything. In her own way incredibly sweet, always protected the less popular kids. Anyways, she hits 21, gets a huge trust fund. Her uncle puts up a fight for the money because he knows she's going to go nuts with it. It wasn't for the cash. He had much more than her. Ultimately he loses and she gets everything. It's the beginning of the end for her. She blows through massive wealth in 2 years, doing untold amounts of binge drinking, trips to crazy places, constantly surrounded by people using her for party money. We're talking millions of dollars here, not a cent invested anywhere. Anyways, 2 years later she's back with the uncle. Not a penny to her name. He loves her, so of course takes her in. Everyone that hung on to her for the past 2 years is gone. Everyone laughs at her behind her back. A few overdoses and drug use left her a little slow. She tries school but it doesn't work. Her uncle gave her a job but it's a token thing. At least she's lucky enough that she had someone to look after her in the end. She failed the Harry Potter test. My friend started up a gaming store, like for tabletop games, Magic the Gathering, D&D, gaming figurines, etc. He mistakenly thought because he was so interested in the material it would be easy for him to jump into. He has no business acumen, and never owned a business in the past. He never had a lot of money, always rented, always behind on bills, had child support kids to pay for, etc. Although he was really good at penny pinching and saving money, that was only half the equation. He ended borrowing a bunch of money from his new wife. He set his store location up in a small town that's rather out of the way, bad location. He claimed the store was only temporary and was supposed to be a storage site so he could ship items sold off the internet. Thus, he never got much traffic and therefore few sales. However, it was a source of contention between him and his wife. He had confided in me his store was ultimately a reason to get out of the house and away from the family, not a really good reason to throw money into a business. He and his wife ended up divorcing. He decided to quit the store. He ended up with a ton of merchandise packing his meager apartment that he had been trying to sell. Worst of all, he apparently didn't keep his books. He is currently somewhere around $50,000 in tax debt to the state, and increasing with fines. I find this astounding because there is no way he had enough revenue to justify that much in taxes in the period he owned and operated the store. I wonder if something else was afoot? A lot of the time, if you don't file taxes, then the state will assess them for you. This is almost always a much higher amount than is actually owed once you get the proper paperwork filed. He needs to get a decent accountant to go over his books and figure out what he needs to file in order to get caught up. My sil had a kiosk at the mall that didn't make that much money. She doesn't have another job except Uber sometimes. She has 2 kids and always takes them to eat out and does buy stuff that costs beyond her means. She lives with my mill and pays next to nothing for rent, so there's really no excuse. She refuses to even slightly thrift on her kids' clothes and constantly buys them stuff like Lacoste and Ralph Lauren because image is apparently everything. Her oldest just started kindergarten this year. He plays soccer, too, so she splurged on all the high-end equipment, and he's not really even that into the sport. Anyway, his teacher said that in her 25 years of teaching, this was the first time she was ever instructed by a parent to make sure their kid changed his shoes before pay. I just got the news this morning that she lost the kiosk yesterday. 2 men are fines for showing up late to open and bringing her youngest to work with her, so they shut her down. Every once in a while my stepdad will calculate how much money he could save by quitting drinking, then decides to quit and starts spending like he has that money. He doesn't actually quit. Pay their current vehicle off with savings, then immediately trade in that car and get a car worth a lot more, only to be back in deeper debt with less in their savings. This person made a lot of other dumbass choices, but that's a different story. If I pay it off now, I can trade it in for something bigger. Happens so often. It's absolutely the worst idea. You currently have a vehicle you don't owe on, that if you just paid it off likely has 36-70k miles, and should last you another 100k miles easy. Bubba, that one hooks up to my phone though. I gave my brother a step-by-step plan to cover his rent, keep his job, fill up his car, and pay me back within a 1-week period. He was tight on money. I found him at Foot Locker with a large bag 2 hours later. That must have hurt. I knew a guy that bought a Trans Am, fully loaded, and had a $700 payment in 1985. That's like $1,650 today. He ended up bankrupt. Another guy I know told me he was going to declare bankruptcy over a $4,000 debt about 20 years ago. We were riding in his late model truck. I said, "Why don't you sell the truck, settle the debt and save up for a new truck?" He got furious and yelled at me for saying that. He ended up bankrupt and still lost the truck. I have a friend who is 40 years old, single, lives by himself and will buy weed as a priority over some of his bills. Every 2-3 months I'll get a call asking for a bailout. He is also on Social Security and lives in a subsidized apartment, pays $120 for rent. Very frustrating to get those calls for help. I went to community college my first year. I knew this guy that was from a super low income family and he received massive amounts of student loans. He blew it all on a used car, wheels and a sound system. I tried to tell him it was a loan and not a grant. He disagreed. Lost touch with him a year or 2 later, but he has to be underwater in debt. It's one thing to pick up a used car for transportation using student loans, but a sound system in it? Jeez. College friend graduated with over $100k in private student loans. The bank offered a $5k credit towards the loans as a graduation gift, or $1,500 in cash. They took the $1,500 and used it as a down payment on a new car. I have a colleague in her mid-50s who is divorced with no kids. She is the sole means of her own financial support. That is, no parents or siblings to fall back on. She lives alone in an apartment. She recently took out her second debt consolidation loan. As soon as she gets those credit cards maxed out, she takes out a loan. pays the cards off and runs them up again. I'd feel sorry for her if the charges were for general living expenses, but they're not. Therefore highlights in her hair, manicures, trips to the Caribbean with boyfriend du jour, those cute sandals that she'll wear twice before replacing them with cuter sandals, high-end everything, makeup, perfumes, clothing. Once in a while, she will lament about her $40,000 loans and the fact that she is literally 2 paychecks from being homeless, and I will gently point out that less trips to the salons and the islands might put her in a better financial position. I work hard and I deserve nice things. I deserve vacations. I deserve to feel good and look good. Don't tell me how to spend my money. This, coming from a woman who has to pay for her lunch with a credit card the day before payday because she's overdrawn on her checking account. I've seen her do this, and she explained why she was doing it. She refuses to believe that she's the cause of her own financial difficulties. I worked with someone like this too. She was pushing 60 and getting close to retirement age and still didn't own her own home, and was renting, instead of saving her not inconsiderable salary for the last few years towards a home. She chose to get a Mercedes convertible on the basis that I'll never be able to own something like this again. I know someone that will refuse to work a regular job, lives off the women in his life, doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together at 52 years old, and complains constantly about how everything is rigged to keep him from succeeding. I see you know a slightly older version of my brother-in-law. One of my old friends was living paycheck to paycheck, less than that some months. She was eating food from work for breakfast, which was one of those ice cream places. When I was asking her about her finances to see where she could cut back, she mentioned that she smoked recreational weed every day, several times a day, but she said, "It's only a hobby that I could stop at any time." However, she refused to stop when I told her it was a possible avenue to cut back on if she wanted to comfortably make her bills. It kind of got tiresome to hear about how she had no money for food constantly. Weed isn't addictive. I just like getting high too much to stop. Okay. My friend had saved up around 8k and was planning to use it to down a new car. Instead, his parents forced him to use that money to buy his little brother a used car. Rather than buying something cheap and reliable like a Camry, the dumbass little brother goes full JDM and buys a crappy overpriced Nissan Silvia. The car still needed work and the idiot didn't even know how to work on cars. When I found out what happened, I was freaking livid. I know how hard he had worked to save that money. What's worse is that the younger crashed the car a few months later and it just sat in front of their house for almost a year before they sold it off for dimes. Not the worst, but I had a strong lesson about money management. I was 11 or something. Hitman Blood Money just came out. I was hyped. I loved that series. So I've started to save money right away. I was saving by walking home instead of taking a bus. I was saving by not eating candy or drinking soda, etc. I was really close. But one day as I was walking home I saw cousin. He was holding a RC car, brand new. I asked about it and he said he won it with luck. He told me there is a game in the market near us. I was amazed. So you can pay $1 and spin the wheel? I wanted to try that game. And I wanted to win. I said to myself, okay Captain Cola, just 2-3 games. I went there and spin the wheel, and then I spin it again, and again. I lost, but I still had a lot of money, right? When I realized I blew most of my Hitman money, I was determined more than sad. I wasn't going to afford Hitman, but I still had a chance for that car, so I spin again. Reality set in when I was sitting on a bank with a bag full of crappy candy and plastic vampire teeth. I lost everything I made in a month in 1 hour. I learned a hard lesson early, so I'm really grateful, but I still keep my saved money somewhere I can't reach easily, just in case. Maybe one of the cheapest ways to learn that lesson. There was this guy from a hillbilly town who won the Lotto, 1 million Canadian dollar. The guy was definitely not well off before. He was being interviewed by a reporter asking him what he was going to do with the money. He said he had spent already half of it buying pickup trucks for his cousins, his family, his uncles and friends, and also bought 3 snowmobiles and 5 ATVs. Oh well, hopefully he's happy. My ex-husband Sill's ex-husband's new wife's parents say that 3 times fast. died in a motorcycle accident that ended up with the couple getting around $500,000. My ex-il immediately latched onto her ex-husband along with her 7 kids, 4 of which he believes are his. They bought a new house and my ex-il moved into their old house. They also bought 5 or 7 new cars for various people and took ex-il's 7 kids plus their own to Disney World twice. I believe they both quit their jobs, too. In less than a year, they had spent all the money and were back all trying to live in the original old house that I believe they lost due to foreclosure shortly thereafter. Not me, but I was once talking to an uncle who told me about the time one of his younger subordinates burned through $5,000 at a strip club with their credit card. The subordinate apparently got their money back by telling their bank it wasn't them when they received their bill. The uncle then had to educate him about what financial fraud was. He basically committed theft of services, because in fraud disputes, the business ends up eating the bill. What a shithead. I like to gamble. I wouldn't say I'm an addict, but it sure is fun for me. Any seasoned gambler will tell you, even an addict, don't put down more than you can afford to lose. I like to play a carnival game called Mississippi Stud because it's slow, relaxing, and if you have patience, almost always lucrative. This is a game where you may have to fold 20 hands, but in one hand triple the initial money you put down. That is when you should walk away, but this is where casinos make money, because almost nobody does. I was at a table and this guy hits on 4 jacks. At this table, that's 41 odds, and he totaled $4,000 in his win. So he gets up from the table and I am happy for him. He is walking away with a nice chunk of change. Eventually I get up and head over to the roulette wheel to end my stay, because even though roulette is pure luck, it offers the best exhilaration for me. Few feelings in this world match the feeling of when you hit your number. After a few spins the guy who won the $4,000 walks over and plops the entire stack of cash on the table. He puts all his money on red. It landed on black. Guy I knew at uni spent his entire student loan allowance for the semester in 2 weeks, so he got a payday loan out to fund a night out, like £100 at an extortionate payback rate. Ended up owing £8,000 in a few months. Got a credit card out to pay that off. Maxed out his credit card in maybe 6 months. He didn't work at uni. His family was on the darker side of poor. He was the kid that was going to make something of himself, so he got the absolute maximum in loans and bursaries. And every time he received the money for them he'd spend it in a matter of days on VIP in clubs and bottle service etc. Not even clothes or gadgets or whatever. I didn't even go to uni in a particularly expensive city. Ironically he was studying something like economics or business. Either way, he dropped out at the end of first year and now works as a car salesman earning a fair amount but living in a tiny studio flat and complaining that one of those furniture rental places won't let him rent out something like a 60 inches TV and PS4 because his credit is so bad. We all tried to warn him but we were called stupid because it was free money. Bet you he spends his free time posting on Reddit about how banks are evil for expecting him to pay back school loans. I am a restaurant grams. I watch most of my servers spend at least 50% of their money on booze and or food. Every single day, they bring food in from another restaurant before their shift, drink after the shift at a club or bar and then go out and get more food after they have been drinking. I have seen on slow nights where they paid to work that day due to spending their money on booze because they were sad they didn't make very much. My stupid drunk self spent all my rent money on a brand new HD TV. Luckily sober me got a full refund but I was a week late on rent. Dang that's hard. Waking up and seeing a bad mofo of a TV sitting in my house would be extremely hard to return, even knowing it could put me late for rent, once it's in the house and you're using it. My mother is single, 50 years old, a manager at her store and pulls in about $3,500 a month if not more. She rents a room from a friend, $200 a month, and friend confirms that she hardly ever pays her, has no car payment, she takes no vacations and never shops. She claims to be broke 100% of the time. I suspect she is addicted to prescription pain pills. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.